Welcome to Hip-Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip-hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip-Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip-hop music and culture that happen throughout the week. Big shout out to the supporters over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to learn more about what it's like to be a Patreon supporter, or you just want to support the podcast, click the link in the description of this episode. We are headed in the direction of 500 subscribers of this podcast. So if you watch frequently or you watch this particular episode and you like it, not only hit the like button, but become a subscriber to stay locked in to weekly hip-hop content. Now, if you haven't already, check out my top 5 albums of all time. But today, as an MC, we're going to talk about my top 5 MCs of all time. Not the top 5 MCs of all time, because honestly, I'm just not the guy for that. I could be a part of a group and make a vote, but I can't stick to a top 5. I could barely stick to this top 5, okay? But my reasons, my criteria have nothing to do with sales, have nothing to do with where you're from. Yes, it may influence the way you're from part. Yes, it may influence in some ways my top 5, but at the same time, for me, it doesn't. I own a lot of music, and it's really about what connects with you. Just a perfect example for those who like to use that argument quite often and feel like that's what everybody does. When I hear the word Brooklyn, I don't automatically like it, right? I don't own Mano's entire collection, and Mano's not only from Brooklyn, but he grew up a couple of blocks away from me, not that far, closer to where I lived than where Biggie lived, right? So hearing where I'm from is not a thing for me. I've been hearing that since the beginning of hip hop. I'm from New York City, okay? But why these are my top 5 is just because they are artists who, no matter whack, hot, dope, so-and-so, I will always check for their music, because they have been probably the top 5 artists to satisfy me as a fan, right? Like, I'm almost not disappointed. In a lot of ways, I'm almost, on whack albums, I'm almost looking to make sure I understand. A lot of artists don't get that, and that's why these are my top 5 MCs. So it's not only the catalog, the output, how dope they are, it's also what they've done and its impact on me that's made me a loyal fan throughout the years. So, with that being said, no special order, but we're going to start out with my favorite at the top. It's the Notorious B.I.G. Biggie Smalls. Yeah, Brooklyn, what up? But nah, I think the thing that resonated with me with Big was first hearing his voice. He had a certain type of energy that was powerful. Like when I first heard him on Heavy D's Blue Funk album, a song called A Bunch of Niggas. I'm sorry if you don't like hearing that word, but these guys be naming their albums that. This Heavy D named his album that, okay? I mean the song that. But I just remember, I just liked the way he rhymed over the beat. And not too long after that, I heard his single off the Who's the Man soundtrack, and I actually have the Who's the Man soundtrack back here. I don't see it quick enough to grab it. Heavy D's Blue Funk is here also. But I just remembered hearing this song off the Who's the Man soundtrack called Party and Bulls, right? And I was like, wow, why no one's ever made a record like this before, like about a house party in the hood. And honestly, I'm gonna just keep it a buck with y'all. I might have been to 2 house parties in the hood ever. because I was at the point where I'm like, yo, somebody always getting shot. And I don't mean like on some, there's always beef. Like sometimes guns just go off and somebody get hit because you in there. You know what I'm saying? So I always used to be like, yeah, it's kind of reckless. I don't know, man. It's like I gotta wait till I get old enough to go to the club, so I know at least everybody get checked. I don't want to be dancing and catch a stray. But you hear about it all the time. You know it's a thing, and Biggie made a song about it, and I just remember him just sounding in a way that was just so powerful. And prior to him releasing his debut, Ready to Die, there was the Best of Biggie mixtape put together or curated by DJ Mr. C. Rest in peace, DJ Mr. C and Notorious B.I.G. But I remember like everybody had that mixtape, like everybody, and if you didn't, somebody told you about it. And I remember when I heard the intro, the freestyle that opens that tape up, it was like, you know how when you start to hear bits and pieces from a dude that's new, not a record, but a freestyle here, a soundtrack song there, a feature back then, with the Blue Funk joint, a feature on an album you're listening to, and you start get breadcrumbs from this person, and you like, yo, that dude's kind of nice. Like, I hope he come out with an actual album. Like, when is that dropping? And we didn't have the kind of information and access we have now to kind of, at least get a heads up of when an album's coming, or at least follow the artist directly, like on an Instagram, and see what they're doing. You just had to wait till more information came out or a new record hit the radio. And I remember listening to that mixtape, and there was features he did that I didn't even know existed. Some I had heard, like with Mary J. Blige and all of that, and a lot of songs he did, like with Luke and Sadat X. And I was just like, yo, man, this dude is dope. He kind of shock rapper also, because don't get it twisted, Biggie Smalls was like a shock rapper. He used to say some crazy ish back then. And I just remember, like, man, this dude is dope. When he finally releases an album, I'm getting that joint because I'm sold on him. And I remember when Ready to Die came out, and it was just everything I imagined it would be, but better. And I think what really got me hyped was when I heard Unbelievable. Like, I think I either asked my moms for money to get that, or she had gave me money previously, and I literally saved it, knowing when that joint come out, I'm going to get it. And I remember she took me to Beach Street, yeah, those who know in Brooklyn, where I used to get all my music, where I got all these tapes from. And I was like, I was only there to get that. And I was so hyped. I was reading it. I didn't have a Walkman on me at the time, so I couldn't listen. All I could do was just read everything before I got home to listen to it. And for me, it just cemented, Big as one of my favorites at the time. One of my favorites. Now, obviously, being from Brooklyn, he reminded me a lot of most of people I knew from Brooklyn. So there was that regional factor that played into it. Not necessarily a bias, but we're not talking about somebody who's whack and we like him. It's a bias when you calling somebody the greatest and most people do not even know or like that person. It's another thing when it's more because you're from the same region and you can relate specifically to the blocks this person talking about, to the things he says, right? Like when he say Duke, right? Not rapping Duke, that was that guy's name. But when he said the phrase Duke, that's what we said back then in Brooklyn. So it was kind of like he was just so authentically Brooklyn, and he was great at storytelling, and he had the hardcore gangster side of it in there, and then he was making party records at the same time. He was just a total package to me at that time. And by the time, we had heard remixes and him with Junior Mafia and him featured on Jay-Z album and stuff like that. And then Life After Death, I already knew. I was like, yo, Big is just, he's my favorite rapper. He just doesn't really disappoint. I've never really heard a new Biggie verse and was disappointed. And I think really what really capped it off after he passed is just listening to, and shout out to Tracy Lee, listening to Keep Your Hands High with Tracy Lee off of Tracy Lee's album, debut album, Many Faces, and the things that Big was saying in there. I got a new mouth to feed. I'm due south for keys. Y'all pick seeds out your weed. I watch cowards bleed. Mother, please, it's my block and my rock. Them hip hops, the 1-2s, and you don't stop. Me and my Lance to Kim and C's advance. Bought 10 bricks, 4 pounds of weed from Branson. 12-year man, like, well, he ain't say 12-year man, but whatever. I was like, yo, that man was getting better, which I couldn't even think he would get better than what he already was. So that's why he's my number one, my favorite MC of all time, for a number of reasons. And probably the biggest is the variety that he brought with his lyrics and his music, because it plays into my musical taste. You know, I love variety in music. I listen to all of it. I listen to jazz, rock, whatever. As long as I think it's dope, I'll listen to it. So there you have it. Follow after that is the guy I consider to be the GOAT in hip hop. I did a whole episode explaining it. I'm not going to explain it right now, but that is LL Cool J. LL Cool J needs to get flowers upon flowers upon flowers upon flowers. What I liked about LL was the first time I physically saw him. Well, I won't say it was the first time because that might not be true. But when I knew I really, really, really liked LL, it was the Bigger and Deffer album, and it was his appearance in Crush Groove, right? Like, I liked him when I heard Radio and all that. You know, I thought he was dope, but those two specific albums, and like I'm Bad video specifically, and Crush Groove is when I got to look at him. And he was, you know, and I was younger, so he was young. And not that Run wasn't young. I liked Run, but Run always felt like a generation before me, like kind of like my brother's generation, right? And LL felt like, even though LL wasn't my generation, because my generation is the 90s. But at that time, I was so locked into hip hop, seeing a younger dude who's younger than them doing it in the way he was doing it was crazy. And no pun intended, doing it. And as I started to get a little bit older, and we had albums like Mama Said Knock You Out, where he's displaying all this skill and all these concepts, and the videos are dope. The beats, Marley Marl is doing crazy with the beats. And even when he had whack albums, he had strong singles like Jingling Baby Remix, you know what I'm saying, which, you know, came before. And even though LL would release an album that was like, yo, that's a classic, and then maybe have an album that wasn't as good, he always had super iconic records on these albums. You know what I'm saying? Like, even like Going Back to Cali or whatever it was called. I forget, that's what it's called, right? Because I always think about the big version of that. It was just different. He was just trying different things. And again, variety. And over time, from songs like Around the Way Girl, I Need Love, but it's not one of those. It's one of those records that come on and I'll mess with it and I'll sing it, but I don't necessarily go to press play, right, on that record in particular. But Jingling Baby, and then eventually, I remember I forget, 14 Shots to the Dome. I think they came out like 93 or something like that. And I started feeling like, oh, well, maybe this is when he falls off, because now there's a new generation. He's trying to look the part. He got the black fatigues on and all of that. And this album isn't really that good. And then he drops, when, you know, my freshman year in college, he drops Mr. Smith. And you got songs like I Shot You. And the version without everybody is dope, because I heard that first. And then the joint that got Foxy and Prodigy and Fat Joe, Keith Murray on it was even doper. And here's LL from a time way before this, spitting on this record. Then don't get me started on doing it. I'm in freshman year in college doing it in the club. It's crazy. Okay. And again, throughout his career, from records like No Airplay and stuff like that, and I just felt like LL, one of the reasons why I think he's one of my top 5 greatest MCs of all time, is he can not only make records for the ladies, but he can make them for the fellas as well. It became a time where people felt like that's all he was, like he was Father MC. And he was far from being that, because he still made dope records and he battled, right? Break of Dawn. I mean, not Break of Dawn. Is it Break of Dawn? I guess so. He battled rappers from back then like Kumo D. He battled up-and-coming rappers like Cannabis. He displayed his skill on posse cuts with different generations of hip-hop artists, and I think he did it in a lot of ways, to kind of test if he still had it. And you're talking about a dude who was basically mid to late 80s when he was out. That's crazy. And again, even though sales don't play a part in this, remember, sales is also impact. You don't just sell because you're popular. There's a reason why you're popular. You're popular not because you take your shirt off. There's plenty of dudes with muscles who take their shirt off, right? Wrestlers don't wear shirts. But what I'm saying is people like the music. And there's some guys that don't want to hear none of that lovey-dovey stuff in hip-hop, and I get it. But Around the Way Girl was dope. Big Old Butt was dope. Okay? Doing It was dope. Paradise was dope. Like, LL just had a knack for making great records, but never leaving hip-hop, hardcore hip-hop behind. And he lasted throughout decades. And when I say that, I'm not like, oh, he's around releasing music. No. Those mixtapes in the 90s that had all these new artists and they just killing it with the bars, there was always a new LL record on them. And you didn't skip it. He survived, he had hits and eras from Bad Boy to Death Row to the early Def Jam to the 50 era, the Rockefeller era, the Rough Rider era, the Cash Money era, the No Limit era. Like, LL still had hits and still was making music and still had a level of respect as an MC. So that's why he's my number 2. I know I spent a lot on him, but if I'm gonna call him a GOAT, I gotta say some stuff, All right. Next, Nas. Now, those who know me or don't know, just to clear the air so you know there's no real bias here. I grew up around Nas. I'm not from Queensbridge. I'm from Brooklyn. My family's from Queensbridge. My close cousin was Ill Will, who was also Nas's best friend. Or friend. I don't know the best. Or whatever. Semantics. So I was around. I knew him when we just called him Nasir. It took me a long time to just not call him that. But there was a point in time where it went from a guy I knew and I'm listening to him rap to an MC that I admire, and I'm like, he's one of the greatest of all time. And of course, there's Illmatic, but then there's also It Was Written. And when I first heard the message, I was like, my God, Nas is crazy. It's crazy. Some of the bars on the It Was Written album, some of the best he's ever done. When I heard Eye for an Eye on Mobb Deep's album, my God, like just some of the lyrics he put together in a way he could only do, like street poet type of situation. You know what I'm saying? A drug dealer's dream, stash cream, keys on the triple beam, 500 SL green, 95 nickel gleam condominium Thug dressed like a gentleman, tailor-made ostrich, Chanel for my women friend, murdering, numbers on your head while I'm burglaring. I think I switched that around, but you get the point. It's been a while. Him being on Only Built for Cuban Links with Verbal Intercourse, that verse. You know what I'm saying? Him and AZ and all the work they've done. And his whole career, you know, I Am has some joints, the Lost Tapes, the album that should have been, stuff like Blazer 50 and Fetus on it. The DJ Clue, Foulness. Man, if you have never heard the Foulness, you need to. Nas rapping over old school beats. Just crazy rapping, just dumb nice with it. And you in the battle with Jay-Z, with Ether. Life is good. You just fast forward. You just go through his Made You Look. Songs like I Can, I Know I Can. Making a record for the kids. That was kind of a hit. It still gets played. The Block on New York, Odyssey. They played. It's in rotation. That song from Nas. Out of all the songs he had, and then there's the Hit Boy run. Now, there was a time where I didn't necessarily have Nas in my top 5. And some of my support of his music over the years just came from, I'm going to support him whether it's hot or garbage. But then when I'm watching my peers react to all of this, and I'm reacting to it in real time, the album and the music that he's releasing, I'm like, I need to stop thinking about it that way. He's one of my favorite rappers. That's why I have all his music. It ain't just because I grew up around him. It's because he's worthy of it to me as a fan. He's just that dope. And the Hit Boy run, 6 albums, and really the one that you can consider the not good one, which I think is Magic 2, is not really that bad. It's just not the other 5. The ratio is pretty good when you're looking at it that way. So again, has he or any of the other 3 I mentioned had songs that I necessarily didn't like versus others, or even albums? Of course. But at the end of the day, what Nas has been able to do with his career lyrically, with how he impacts fans in ways that excite them for his music, and no one would ever say that Nas lyrically has been whack. You may not like it because it's just not the type of music you like. That's cool. But you're gonna respect them bars. You got to. You gotta respect it. So 2 more to go. Jay-Z. Now, I'm not one of those people who feel like Jay-Z and Nas are eternally linked together. So if you say one, you gotta say the other. It's kind of like what people do with Biggie and Tupac. I'm just keeping it a buck. Jay-Z, in a lot of ways, was, and not just him, but was the soundtrack to my college experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jay-Z wasn't there when I arrived, right? In 95, Jay-Z wasn't really popping like that. But I remember, and I had the cassette back here, when I was in Beach Street, and, you know, a dude just handed me a sampler of Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt. And it had a couple songs on there, like Can't Knock the Hustle was on there. Only a Customer was on there. In My Lifetime, both versions was on there. And I think Dead Presidents, and maybe one other song. And I remember when I heard that, I'm like, this ain't the same guy from that original Flavor joint. He better now. Like, this is dope. And I remember, shout out to Coke, I remember debating with him, because I was the only one that had the sample. So I was playing for them and like, yo, you hear what he said here? You hear this joint crazy, blah, blah, blah. And me and him were debating who was better, Jay-Z or Ghostface, which at the time was crazy because Ghostface was really only on, at that point in time, was only on 36 Chambers and Only Built for Cuban Link. So that was like You didn't have Iron Man yet. So at that time we were debating. I was like, nah, Jay-Z better than Ghost. What are you talking about? He better than Ghost. And I just remember, like, especially once Big died, but when that debuted album, like, I saw Jay-Z during my college years about perform like 3 or 4 times, like by accident, right? Now, one time was on purpose, right? Because we went there specifically. Like, there was one homecoming where I don't know if he was opening up, but Faith Evans was the main act, and Jay-Z was a part of that, and like Bleak was there and all of that. And this is early. This is Reasonable Doubt. This him driving the Lexus to Baltimore to Morgan State to perform, right? And I thought he was dope then. And then there was another homecoming and we went to both parties, where Busta Rhymes was performing, and he had Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Can See out, so you knew we was going to that. But we had to stop at this other homecoming party first, because it may sound crazy now, but it was Jay-Z and Foxy was there, and it wasn't packed, and it was and Reasonable Doubt wasn't out yet. It was about to come out, but we had been listening to the sampler, and we loved the new single with Foxy, and we was like, yo, we gotta go see him first. And he performed on this, not even a stage, like it wasn't even that crazy of a stage. And I remember him and Foxy performed, and we was right up front. We knew the lyrics, and he could tell we knew the lyrics, because we were just like, we knew it, right? Because we was hip-hop heads. And I remember he teased Friend or Foe right there, and we thought he was freestyling. He was like, yo, I'm gonna do this one thing, and he did it, and we was like, yo, that story joint was crazy. We went to the other party telling them, yo, you should have saw he did this joint story, Friend or Foe, yo, state your biz. You in the dope? There it is. Me, I run the show. Oh, these kids don't like nobody. Like, we were like, yo, this joint crazy. And then Reasonable Doubt came out. I was like, yo, it's on the album. And he got a song with Big. So like with Jay-Z, with every album drop, and he was dropping like every year. That's why it's like the soundtrack to my college years. Every year was like must-see TV situation for a new Jay album, right? And we would debate them, we would anticipate them. Like the first time we heard 1,000,001 Questions on his second album, Volume 1, with Premiere, we was like, yo. And you know what other record? I don't want to spend too much time. It's Like That, off the Kid Capri joint. Just put it this way. One of the reasons why Jay-Z is on my top 5 is not only because of his early work. Obviously, I love things like American Gangster and The Blueprint, Black Album, all the way up to 444. It was just Jay-Z's commentary in his bars separated him from his peers. His peers, and this is no slight, but his peers usually came across as, on the corner drug boy kind of situation. But Jay-Z, like I always say, and if you're a fan of The Wire, he always felt more like Stringer Bell, the bigger picture. I'm not doing this to be the dopest dope boy. I'm doing this to buy buildings. I'm doing this to own businesses. And it's all throughout his music. And one of my favorite records off of Reasonable Doubt is Politics as Usual, because it's the reason why some of us like Rick Ross and his lavish raps, right? Politics as Usual is that. Feeling It is that. Can't Knock the Hustle is that. He was just rapping about different, in the same ways, it was the same hood drug culture, but it was different. It was almost like sophisticated hardcore rap. Feel me? And that's what I liked about him and his music, and he's always brought that to it. And again, regardless of what he drops, I'm always going to check for it. There's albums like Kingdom Come that I think is really bad, but I'm always checking for Jay-Z, because he's had that much of an impact on me as an MC. And lastly, and this guy has worked his way into my top 5. And there are many artists like Coogee Rap and Kane and KRS and Ghostface. Like there's so many the Locks. It's so many great MCs over the years. But again, when it comes to my favorites and in this top 5, it's all about the impact on a much deeper level, and that's Kendrick Lamar. And the only reason why, and it had nothing to do with these battles, because I was always championing this dude since Good Kid, Mad City, really since Section 80. But he just doesn't disappoint, and I can't anticipate what he's going to do, and that's what makes it intriguing. And when I am able to like decipher what he's doing with this project versus the next project, it just keeps feeding the legend that is K-Dot. Okay? And this battle proved the argument that I used to give to people who I knew who didn't really care for him. And when they heard certain records like Meet the Grams or Not Like Us or 616 in LA or Euphoria, I was like, that's why I like him. You release like 5 diss records. None of them sound the same. All of them are dope in their own right, and they all leave Easter eggs to the next record. And conceptually, they all have one statement. That's Kendrick Lamar when he releases albums. Good Kid, Mad City is nothing like To Pimp a Butterfly. To Pimp a Butterfly is dope. It's nothing like Damn. Missed them around the Big Steppers. I know a lot of people wanted a certain vibe, but it was a concept album. And there's songs on there you could vibe to, but the album is a concept. And that's what I like about him, because not only do I anticipate his music, and I'll always check for it, because like I said, with all these artists, I never feel like they're gonna make something to cheat the game, right? Here y'all go, here go some new songs. Y'all happy? They're just never gonna do that. Whatever they do is gonna have purpose, even if you don't like it. And I feel like with Kendrick Lamar, lyrically, where his bars can go anywhere from the history of the West Coast to being very technical, like a Tech Nine or Eminem style or whatever, or Pharoah Monch, shout out to Pharoah Monch, to social issues, to issues that affect only the hood, to issues that affect everybody, to issues that affect him. And it's not preachy, you know what I'm saying? It's not to the point where you're like, all right, with the civil rights movement out. No, a lot of times, one thing I said to somebody is, this is what I like about Kendrick Lamar the most, and this is what the key is to actually listening to him. If you're looking for dumbed down music, and I don't even mean that in a derogatory way, I just mean something simple enough for you to understand and sing the hook, Kendrick Lamar sometimes will appear as if that's what he's making. But if you understand a lot of things that he's saying, you realize, oh, this song is much deeper than just, the hook. And a lot of music doesn't do that. Yeah, you can pry out meanings, but you can point to the evidence within his bars, within his song, within his albums to say this is the concept. And that's what hip hop has always been about. If somebody's ever said a line that you didn't necessarily get, and someone explained it to you, or maybe you got it later, and you're like, yo, that's crazy, I didn't realize he was saying that. That's where the admiration starts to hit. And I think that's what Kendrick Lamar is. So he's not easily digestible to the common ear. You just have to be willing to understand this guy is never on the surface, dude. It's always a method to his madness. And that's why he's one of the greatest MCs of all time, to me. Who are your top 5 greatest MCs of all time? Leave your comments in the comment section below. We are trying to get to 500 subscribers. Also, check out my top 5 hip-hop albums of all time, where I talk a little bit about all of the albums, including the one I got on the Shizzer. But again, this podcast is available everywhere. You can follow me on social media at Vegas World INC. If you like this podcast, hit the like button. Subscribe. We're trying to get to 500. But more importantly, share it with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.